Hello and welcome to the Adorable Anarchist World, episode 4. Funny thing is, this entire episode, I recorded it last night for like an hours and spent hours trying to use YouTube's new video editing thing on their website, and it is absolutely horrendous. The audio file was not supported, so of course you find myself here early in the morning before work trying to cram this in. But luckily, I know what I'm going to talk about, and I know what today's subject is. So we'll see how well this goes. Today's subject, I thought I would go deeper into what I was talking about last week with romantics. And to start off, I'd like to give a short recap of what I consider romanticism to be. So romanticism has to do with art, the love of art, the artist, the inspiration from the world around us that creates these great ideas of art, subjectivity from what we subject ourselves to in the everyday world, and most of all, sanctity of the individual. And this is kind of where I thought it was strange that romantics, from what history has shown us, tend to lean towards three political ideology groups. First two being liberalism and fascism. But the one that it seems to latch itself onto the most really surprised me, which was nationalism. Which I couldn't help but think, what is so individualistic about nationalism? That makes no sense. As a romantic, I am baffled that this is actually what romantics would want to associate themselves with. Personally, I find the romantic ideas to have more in common with the libertarian philosophy than anything else. The ideas of liberty, freedom, and liberation, they all pair quite well with individualism, subjectivity, and inspiration. Which that's another thing, too. Capitalism is just straight up better for the artist. It gives the artist the opportunity to amass the resources he needs to make the art, to bring in more revenue, to create more art. It makes his art worth a damn, and it gives his life meaning. In a communist society, it is just opposed to the artist, and many communists will try and talk around this, but it's just straight up not true, because communism caters to the worker, not the artist. If anything, it drowns out the artist and makes his art worth nothing. I was debating someone on this subject one time, and probably the best argument that they could come up with why communism would be a better for the artist is that, well, basically what it boiled down to was we could appreciate it better. You can appreciate art better in a communist society. Do you not realize how silly that sounds? To assume just because you're in a certain society, just because you're living under a different system, that doesn't mean that means you can't appreciate great art. The price tag is merely a way of measuring the amount of the tool of money that they can bring in or give back. It's a mess. There are two specific books, though, that I would like to talk about as what I consider to be great romantic novels. But before this, I'm going to go into great detail of the place where I discovered both these novels. It was a Montessori school. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Maria Montessori, but if you are a libertarian, I highly recommend looking up her works. Her ideas on learning have changed my life. I have learned several things because of her methods, including guitar. However, the woman at the school that I went to, the one who ran it, did not understand Maria Montessori's ideas at all. If anything, what she did was prepare us for debt and Keynesian economics. Because we had a list of things to do during the day and during the week, and if you didn't finish the list by the end of the week, the list that you didn't finish carried over into the next week, and now you were confined to your desk where you had to raise your hand to get up and do anything. It's kind of like getting in debt, because then there's no way of getting out. Anyways, moving on. The Giver and The Boy of the Painted Cave. Two romantic novels that I personally love. And when I say romantic, I mean in an artistic term, not in a loving term. I'll start with the more lesser famous of the two first. The Boy of the Painted Caves. It is the tale in caveman. It's a tale in caveman times about a boy named Teo. He is in his tribe. Being a cave painter is forbidden. To paint, you must hunt or gather. Then, one day, he decides to question his tribe and go against it and start painting simply out of the love that he has for art. He wants to be the next cave painter. And in this process, he breaks many of his tribe's taboos, befriending wolves, talking to the tribes across the river. It is a great tale of man in the face of authoritarian rule. And I would highly recommend it to any libertarian out there who simply enjoys a story about exactly that, man in the face of authoritarian rule. I don't want to spoil too much about it, but it is a great book. I would recommend it if you have a small child, because it's pretty short too. It's similarly same length as Anthem. It's not that long. Anyways, the second book, the book that is actually coming out with a movie soon, so it'll be interesting to see how that is portrayed. The Giver by Lois Lowry. Whew, man, Lois Lowry. My mother's maiden name is Lowry, so I find that very funny. Anyways, in The Giver, Jonas is a young boy living in things known as communities. Communities are these perfect structural societies that where the chaos of bureaucracy and organization of controlling everyone's lives has somehow turned out to be order. The world around him is black and white. There is no life. Everything is planned. Everything is regulated. When he graduates from what would be the school in this universe, Jonas is selected for a job that he thought very unlikely, that he did not expect to get. Jonas was chosen to be the receiver to a man known as the Giver, who, if I were to look back on the character now, I can only refer to him as some sort of philosopher for this society. However, he clearly is the only one who has a great grasp on what is truly going on and an understanding for it. And from there on out, Jonas starts to learn from the Giver and recover memories to see and experience other stories of mankind and humanity. And as this slowly happens, color starts to slowly seep into his reality. He begins to question the communities. He begins to question love. He begins to question everything that surrounds him until he can take no more, and he runs away. I need not spoil no more, for it is a great book. If you've not read it, read it as somewhat of an Inception ending. And if not, then go see the movie. I don't know if it's going to be good. It's not out yet. Looks pretty decent so far. I mean, Jeff Bridges is playing the Giver, so I guess you can't really go wrong with that. I definitely agree with that. If you ever want to tell me anyone to play the Giver, I would have said him, but anyways, it's a great story. And that's just the thing, though. Art is a great way of spreading intellectual revolution. Like, look at someone like Shepard Fairey, the California street artist who made the Obama Hope poster, as well as an entire franchise around his artwork, Obey. As much as we do not agree with his views on socialism, he clearly has done some sort of a good job spreading his message. because people know it. Or at least for the most part, people know it. Besides these kids who wear obey shirts and don't even realize what that bloody hell it means. It's very... That is what art is good for, is spreading this ideas. And I've seen sort of this in the libertarian community. Whoever is doing the artwork over at Liberty Maniacs is doing a very good job. So kudos to them. But it's the struggles of the artist that capitalism truly helps. And, normally right about here someone will pause and make a bunch of angry comments on why capitalism hurts the artist. But hear me out. Capitalism is good for the artist because, look at this. Let me give you an example. When I was in New York last time, I bought a painting by a man on the road who was simply using stencils and spray paint. It was a great painting of outer space. I paid him about 15, maybe $20 for it. Don't really remember. Now, let me explain to you why this was good. For one, aside from paying him out on the street, so he most likely is not going to pay taxes on this, he also now has the money needed to do whatever he might need to do, whether it be buy food, deal with finding a place to stay, or buying more stuff to make art. I don't understand why any type of artist would want to oppose capitalism. I'm sorry, it just does not make sense. Freedom is a romantic feeling. There are many emotions that come up with it. And that's just another problem too, is people view romanticism as romantic emotions, as irrational. I beg to differ. The way I've seen romantics is it's logic with emotional flares. It's because logic without emotion is simply empty words. They are pathetic. They have no use. And for those of you who say our modern system is capitalism, I would just like to say, I personally don't think it truly is. There's capitalistic flares to it, like what I mentioned, but it is very corporatist. I'd like to read you an example of an artist who was trying to make the movie of his dreams, and the corporate structure ruined it. I'm not going to claim to remember this man's name, but you may look him up on your own time. He directed many films, such as a Chuck Jones Christmas Carol, a Raggedy Ann and Andy cartoon. But most of all, I'm sure you all know him for his most famous work, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? A great film. Through all these films, he was funding a film that he considered to be his artistic masterpiece. He was funding it all independently. And the film was meant to be a story told strictly through animation and the beauty of the atmosphere it created. There was very little talking from any of the main characters. That was the original plan. Halfway through the process, though, it was taking so long to get this film done. So a Bond company and Miramax Studios booted him off the project of his own artistic creation. No corporation should have the right to boot the artist off of what he is creating, no matter what. The movie is called The Thief and the Cobbler. And after Miramax took over, they slapped together their own shithole copy, total ripoff of Disney, putting in horribly written songs. And when I say horribly written, I mean very, very lazily written, to the point where it's like, how did you ever even get hired to write this crap? And yet, watching it, I can only think that I feel bad for the artist, because this was not the tale that he wanted to tell. I don't know if he's dead or alive, but I'd hope he was dead. That way he didn't have to see any of this. It's a very embarrassing film. And I would like to go on to something and debunk a phrase that seems to be very common among those who criticize romantics, who criticize libertarians, who criticize anarcho-capitalists. From people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, they all say this. You're young, and you just haven't experienced the world yet. Assuming that you are naive, and you have no firm grasp in reality. This is such a mind-boggling statement, because to say such a thing is to pretty much say, I have already lived, and I have learned. I know better than you. However, that is simply not true. To suggest that you've already lived is to suggest you are yet an old person lying on the deathbed or already dead. You are still learning just as I am, but you just think that you have figured it out. I merely am acknowledging that I don't know, and that I am still learning about this world around me, and that there is still so much to learn. And I'm the naive one about the world. I actually recognize that there is a lot I don't know, and I attempt to learn all that I can. There is an infinite amount of information in the universe, and I attempt to learn as much as I can, as much as any person truly can, because it's impossible to get it all. Heck, I am merely living the human story day by day, night by night. Making it through life, finding meaning, whether it be through love, art, hate. I hope, however, that most find it through love, for hate simply turns all wise men to fools. I have never seen hate end well. Hate only leads to things like brutalism, which is a subject for possibly next week, which I plan to read up more on. They call this a great romantic fantasy. Yet why even call it that? If you're trying to use that as an insult, it really isn't a good insult. It's like calling me a bourgeois individualist. I gotta swallow the word bourgeois, but the word individualist ain't that bad. But seriously though, why? Why would be calling it a great romantic fantasy be such an insult? You have clearly done romantic gestures in the past for love. So why even use romantic in such a derogatory way? This is a great romantic fantasy. However, time, in our eternal now, we are slowly waking up. Every day, I see more and more people waking up to the world around them, realizing the difference between that of a ruler and that of a leader, realizing what we need more of in the world and what we need less of. And you know what? This is a great romantic fantasy, slowly becoming a reality. And as it slowly becomes reality, we slowly become free, independent, beautiful human beings who truly own and govern ourselves, but realize even though we have this responsibility, we are still accountable for our actions. Because if you act wrong, if you hurt someone, then it is rightful you be dealt with justly. Alright, well, I hope you've enjoyed listening to the Adorkable Anarchist World podcast. I hope that, hopefully by next week, I will have a web camera when my paycheck comes in again. And I will no longer have to use this little circle in the center, which I've been watching this whole time. And please feel free to go like me on Facebook. Let's get the like page up. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm Mitchell Wiechek. You're listening to the Adorkable Anarchist World, and this is but a great romantic fantasy, slowly but surely becoming a reality.